Session 51. Good evening. I spoke in our last session of the cooperation existing between the cells of the body, and of the cooperation existing between the atoms and molecules that make up the cells and organs. There is also a mechanism within the subconscious that allows for the materialization or projection of idea or inner vitality into physical construction. This capacity is inherent even in the atom and the molecule and the smaller particles. You will remember that we said that atoms and the molecules contained consciousness, a generalized consciousness first of all, in which data is suspended in condensed mental genetic code, and also a self-consciousness to some limited degree. The capacity and mechanism necessary to project idea into physical matter is, therefore, present in the individual atom and molecule. I mentioned how the atoms and molecules combine to form cells. While each individual atom and molecule does not give up its own uniqueness, but forms rather a gestalt, so that a cell is indeed a psychic gestalt given physical construction through the capacity that exists within each individual component. The ability to project idea or energy into physical construction is therefore generalized throughout the whole physical human body, and throughout the bodies of any living thing. This capacity, being a part of the generalized consciousness, or what you would call the subconsciousness, therefore performs its function without egotistical awareness or comprehension. I have mentioned also that the cells in an arm could just as well have been formed into the cells of another limb or portion of the body. Here, it is the purpose of this mental genetic code system to maintain such purpose and data. There is a difference between the physical chromosome pattern and the mental gene code, in that the chromosomes carry translated inner instructions in condensed physical form, for the physical cells to follow. However, the mental system that parallels the chromosome system carries in condensed form within the atom's generalized consciousness data that has been transmitted to it by the entity. That is, before entry into your plan, the main characteristics of a personality have already been determined by the personality itself. The inner ego knows what it is about. This inner data is transmitted through the mental genetic system by way of the generalized molecular consciousness to the chromosome system, and the chromosome system then translates data into physical code for the cells to follow. You will find this fits in with the material from our previous session. As far as Robert is concerned, he did correctly receive a short message recently from me, and I will go into this now. Ram noted, yesterday Jane told me of the message she thought she had received from Seth. In it, Seth compared our idea of space travel to traveling from the basement of a building to the top floor. And for a building, he used as an example the ancient Tower of Babel. Seth said, your idea of space travel is indeed as ridiculous as trying to build a huge, tall structure many stories high, and considering this building as a space vehicle. Buildings may be used for many things. As space vehicles, you will admit they would be hilarious. For one thing, they are attached to your earth. For another, traveling from the basement up to some 16th story hardly would bring you any closer in any real manner to the stars. Through Robert's subconscious, I picked up the old legend of the Tower of Babel. And yet, this is precisely what you are attempting now in space travel. You almost hope to continue the knowledge that you could construct a building high enough to reach the stars. Now, although your space vehicles are not as apparently connected to the ground, they are indeed connected to the ground of your camouflage patterns in a most meaningful manner, since they are themselves camouflage. Later, I want to tie this in with some other material, and with some of your recent experiences. I will have more to say along these lines, but suggest your first break. I also will make some comments on witnesses in general, which you may find helpful, and my greetings, incidentally, to your guest. I also mentioned that chemicals alone, in whatever form and with whatever mixtures, will not give you consciousness. The fact is that this statement that I have just given you is true and false. In that chemicals alone will give you consciousness, simply because we know now that every molecule exists on your plane is there as the physical materialization of conscious energy. When I say that chemicals alone will not give you consciousness, I am speaking of the theory held that physical matter, chemicals and atoms, that were inert and lifeless, suddenly through some metamorphosis attained a conscious state through an evolutionary development. The consciousness always exists before the physical materialization. The God concept, of course, originated from mankind's innate knowledge that consciousness precedes physical construction. When the physical origin of your universe is finally discovered, your scientists will be no better off than they are now. They will immediately be up against the problem that above all others they have avoided for so long, that of the origin behind the origin. The simple fact needs restating. The physical universe and everything in it is the result of consciousness. It did not involve consciousness. To the contrary, consciousness not only created the physical universe, but continues to do so. We will here avoid a discussion in depth of the God concept. From the material that you have so far, you understand, I hope, that this constant creation of the physical universe is carried on by each individual in it, on a subconscious level, through the use of mechanisms which I have at least partially explained. Cooperation is always a vibrant and necessary law, and you may add cooperation to our list of laws governing the inner universe. Now, this constant creation of the physical universe is not maintained through some localized subconscious that exists somewhere between 2 ears, behind the forehead. The individual subconscious, as I have explained, is the result of a psychic pooling of resources and abilities. It is a gestalt, maintained and formed by the cooperating, generalized consciousness of each atom and molecule of which the physical body is composed. Each individual atom within its generalized consciousness has the capacity, in some degree, to construct its portion of energy into physical construction. It is extremely important that you understand this fact and realize that individual cells, for example, lose no individuality in this process and gain immeasurably, the whole physical structure of the body being the result of this cooperation of cells, which are themselves the result of the cooperation of atoms and molecules. This resulting pattern or physical body makes it possible for the cells, atoms and molecules to express themselves and to fulfill abilities that would be impossible for them in another context. They share to some degree in the perspective reached through the abilities of a physically large body structure, in a way that would be denied to them in other fashions. From their cooperation, they achieve a value fulfillment along certain lines. I mentioned the capacity for infinite mobility and transmutation as being one of the laws of the inner universe. And in this particular instance, the atoms and molecules have the opportunity for value fulfillment along many lines, according to the form that their cooperation and combination may take. I am explaining this matter rather thoroughly because we will be getting to matters concerning the entity and its personality developments. The entity, for example, worked with the same sort of individual cooperation and uses building blocks of energy in much the same manner that the atoms and molecules in the physical world combine to form cells, organs, and the whole structure of the physical body. As the various cells maintain their individuality, as they gain in terms of value fulfillment by cooperation and still retain their uniqueness, so also do the various personalities retain their individuality and uniqueness while still cooperating to form the psychic structure of the entity, which in one context also forms them. And with this little problem, I will let you take your break. There are more ways to see what is inside an egg than cracking it, as you will discover. I hesitate to interrupt your social break. Nonetheless, I will continue. It goes without saying that mankind is not alone in maintaining the physical universe and in giving it continuity, as he projects and constructs his own physical image, and as this image is the direct result of his own inner psychic climate, and as it reflects more faithfully his own inner joy and illness, and as this joy and illness shows itself physically in his image, so also do all living things construct their own images, and help to maintain the physical properties of your universe. Not only does the physical matter that composes these images go back into the physical storehouse, to be reused time and time again, but also the physical matter is broken down once again to the state in which it was before its cooperation of parts that formed a particular physical body. The cooperation is gone. We have spoken of mental enzymes and of their importance. It would be helpful to reread those passages in connection with this material. It is because every atom and molecule contains within it condensed comprehension, inner, direct, codified comprehension of the inner universe as a whole, that these atoms and molecules are capable of such varied combinations and variations. I have said that this condensed comprehension is readily available when it is needed. It is latent within the generalized consciousness of each atom and molecule, and is directly responsible for the combination into cell structure. One of Ruber's little prized perceptions was his realization that you see, or are aware of, only your ideal constructions. Basically, each individual inhabits a completely different world. We will carry this further. As you are not aware of many so-called realities with which your own cat is familiar, so you are completely unaware of other universes that coexist with your own. Your outer senses are equipped to perceive your own camouflage patterns. They are not equipped to deal with other camouflage patterns. The camouflage patterns within your own physical universe are coherent enough so that all individuals of a given species appear to perceive more or less the same surroundings. There are groupings of perceptions belonging to various species, but all of these perceptions are not inherent in each species. We will cover this more thoroughly later. However, I wanted to make the statement here. The material dealing with the interrelationship and cooperation of the various species in their combined maintenance of your physical universe will take many sessions. However, I will go into the methods involved. You already have a basic statement concerning the mechanisms involved. The fact is that even in your own universe, all of your camouflage forms are not perceived by any one species, your own included. At best, your scientists will only discover more of these camouflage patterns, but the entire system will simply not be perceived by any one species, and you will never perceive camouflage patterns outside of your own patterns. You are simply blocked in the pursuit of knowledge beyond a certain point, as long as your scientists proceed in the lines of their present development. The inner senses can perceive other camouflage patterns with training. As I mentioned, there are universes coexistent with your own, but your camouflage outer senses cannot perceive these. Nor with your limited cause and effect theories will you ever get very far. The cause and effect theory, as I have stated, is a result of your ideas of time. As long as you persist in thinking in terms of past, present, and future, then the cause and effect theory is a logical and seemingly infallible result. When you developed your time theory and realized that present, past, and future are merely effects and distortions caused by your own perspective, then your scientists will realize that cause and effect is a passé and antiquated theory, useful only for a short time. I hope you appreciate the pun with the word time, and should be discarded. There is more I want to say, bringing in the matter of our spacious present. However, by all means, take your break. I have rushed in one manner, giving you some extant material to follow that last session, and yet the quality did not suffer, though I pushed Ruber rather far. He was somewhat concerned since you have begun having witnesses, and you will see the material speaks for itself. This is a process of education. When you are asked about these sessions, That is your answer. On my part, I am an educator. Any results or so-called demonstrations will be the result of training, study, discipline, and exercises. The material will always be the basic tool for study. The suggestions given in the material, the exercises in psychological time, and so forth, are to be approached as you approach them. After a thorough knowledge of the material and a familiarity with the purposes behind the experiments. I have often told you of the possible dangers involved in approaching experiments without the safeguards of discipline and study. After attendance at an initial session, those interested should then begin a study of the material. In no instance should any experiments be tried by witnesses in the beginning. As matters come up such as this, I will deal with them. I cannot say too strongly that I welcome those interested. However, this evening I did not attempt to answer your guest's 2 questions. Not because I disapproved, merely because at this point, the material is the important thing, and I didn't want to be sidetracked. There is another reason. I do not want these sessions to get the reputation of giving demonstrations for reasons that are rather complicated. The way in which I have given you the material results in a steady progression, and this is important. At later times, my attitude may change. However, because of the attitude in the scientific world at large, these sessions should have a more sober climate. In that I do not want either of you to be thought of, in Rubert's words, as a pair of nuts. And I am just the boy to give the sessions a sobriety, as you will know. Now, returning briefly, I would like again to mention our spacious present, in which all things have their existence. When the spacious present is understood, with its attributes of spontaneity, then the cause and effect theory will fall. The cause and effect theory, being the result of continuity, holds no water. Basically, the spacious present, as you know, does have durability, because of the existence of value fulfillment. It does not have continuity, in the manner in which the term continuity is usually used. Continuity usually implies one thing happening before or after another. The spacious present contains instead spontaneity, and within it all happenings are simultaneous, and yet there is durability. The durability is achieved because of constant expansion in terms of value fulfillment. Your camouflage physical universe does necessarily lead you to suppose that time exists in terms of past, present, and future, simply because the idea or energy constructed into physical reality, therefore, operates under physical properties. There is so much of which you are not aware. You have taken certain arbitrary points of beginning and departure for practical purposes, as for example, the birth of a child used to be considered the actual entry of consciousness. Now, your scientists realize that the living human being is indeed alive in the womb. Centuries ago, this was not admitted. And the physical image brings up this problem. When does it actually attain life? You know, of course, that the consciousness is the first. The image is the second resulting phenomenon. The physical body image that seems to die at a particular point, and since to enter your physical universe at a particular point does neither. There is no particular minute or hour for the materialization or dematerialization of the physical body. Only your perspective makes it seem so. Your life, believe it or not, basically is a simultaneous happening. You merely see it in slow motion. The true meaning and the true happening in your life occurs along the lines of value fulfillment, in terms of comprehensions, psychological experiences, and fulfillments that do not take up space, and that are independent of time, as you know it. You cannot perceive either the consciousness or comprehension, condensed and latent, in the sperm, and then in the fetus, before the human body's complete construction. Nor can you see or perceive the comprehension or the consciousness that is still there, when so-called death occurs. This does not mean that a human being contains no consciousness before the moment, or the arbitrary point of birth. You merely say life begins here. Your saying so, however, does not preclude the fact that consciousness began long before. Your arbitrary decision that consciousness ends with the change of physical properties at the arbitrary point you call death does not preclude the fact that consciousness does not end here. There is a metamorphosis that occurs with the change of the fetus, from a fetus into a full-blown, miniature human being at birth. This change is not much looked into, because it occurs beyond the reach of your outer senses. Nevertheless, this metamorphosis involves, in appearance, such a change as to seem impossible. At the other end, so to speak, there is also a change which you do not perceive, and you do not perceive it, because as the consciousness contracts the fetus from the inner plane, so then the consciousness is now beginning to enter another plane, where it is equally beyond your perception. It merely ceases to construct the physical image. There is no great mystery here. What seems a mystery is merely the result of ignorance. I always hesitate when we approach this subject, since your so-called spiritualists, while possessing some knowledge, usually cloak whatever knowledge they have in the gaudy robes of pseudo-occultism. They are fully as idiotic as Frank was in his Mason's robes. Rob noted here, as though for my benefit, since I am so interested in Frank was, Dre pounded upon the table I use as a writing desk. Seth said, I suggest that we end the session, though I still have much to say. Nevertheless, a brief discussion with your guest will be beneficial and is in order. And we will still get to your experiences, Joseph, and Rupert will hear himself discuss his own. I bid you all a most fond good evening. Some evening soon I will be more playful, but much of this material must be laid on with a heavy hand. Good night, Tutsis. I look forward to our next session, and we will still have our party session, Joseph. Ross said, good night, Seth.